and not torture human beings. We were able to move that bill last year, get it to the governor's desk, and unfortunately, the governor vetoed the bill. We are bringing the bill back, and there's a big fight around that. And I would ask everybody to join in this fight to make sure that whatever the people have done, that we treat them like human beings while they're in our custody. One of the biggest things going on right now is a fight that started a long time ago, but became a real fight last summer. And it's a fight to keep our young people out of prison. You may have heard iterations on the theme that juveniles are stealing cars all the time, and that people are going to be shot in their driveways, and that the state of Connecticut is just not a safe state. Connecticut is one of the safest states in the United States of America. And there are people right now who have policy prescriptions that they want to make bills that become law, and those are entering the process in judiciary. And we're going to fight against it. But what we need is for people to recognize that part of what is happening here is what has always happened. And it is, we talk about juveniles, but that's code for Black youth, right? And so when you start talking about Black youth, it's easy to criminalize them because we have seen them as something different. It's why back in the 80s and 90s, you were able to talk about the wild packs of Black youth, and people go along with it. It's part of the reason, it's part of what built into those crime bills that we saw ourselves passing into law in the 1990s. The same thing is happening today in Connecticut. People are trying to pass bills that will not make people safer, but are built upon people's fear of Black people, particularly Black youth. And if there's anything that we need to fight right now, it is that. We cannot come out of this session having passed any of those things. And I know people are telling you you're not safe. Take a second to step back and ask yourself what you've actually seen with your own eyes, not what you've heard people tell you, but what you've seen with your own eyes. And what you've seen with your own eyes is what you've been seeing. It's a safe state. You can walk down the street. There are crimes, but there's nothing inherently different because we pass some laws all of a sudden and people are less safe. So the biggest thing that we're going to do this session is save our kids by not allowing those bills to pass.
Thank you, Senator Gary Winfield. And I'll thank you to all the panelists for your remarks today and for all you do. And you encourage and inspire all of us to do more. Thank you. And I will turn it over back to our MC, Mary Thigpen.
Thank you, Manny. I too want to thank the panelists. It was excellent speech and excellent remarks. And Senator Winfield, I wanted to say thank you very much for that last piece, because yes, we do really need to save our youth and make it a better way for them. Thank you for that. Now for our guest speaker this evening, I want to introduce our keynote speaker, Eric Brooks. He's a back it up. He's a co-chair of the African American Equality Commission of the Communist Party USA. Currently focusing on racism, police violence, voting rights, racism, healthcare, education initiative, employment, and countering structural racism everywhere. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, he lived in Indiana since 1999. He's the father of a wonderful daughter and holds many positions, including co-chair of the Indiana District CPUSA Community Co-Chair and Central Indiana Jobs with Justice. And he serves as a board on the National Alliance Against Racism and Political Repression. Eric Brooks is a scholar and an activist since his early age, and he has traveled the world all around. In his remarkable biological notes, he says he looks forward to continue and to contribute the struggle for liberty, for capitalist exploitation and oppression, and invites all working people to join this struggle in this party, and in honor to hear from Eric Brooks.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful introduction. I want to thank you, Mary, and all the organizers and participants for inviting me to join you today. It's a really uplifting event, and the art and the writing by the youth is really inspiring. I also want to say a special thanks to Joelle Fishman for everything that she does in her work in Connecticut and in the country. I also have to say that Art Prolo is in my thoughts, as he is in those of so many of us participating in this event today. So I want to take a moment and just remember Art Prolo Presente. The great mass of humanity, but particularly young people, face serious global social problems today. Climate change, pandemics, war, jobs, hunger, homelessness, sexism, anti-LGBTQ plus policies, police violence, and systemic racism being among the most challenging. There were over 1,100 people killed by the police in 2021, a disproportionate number of them Black, many unarmed, some killed while they were sleeping in their beds. The African American Equality Commission is working with other organizations like the Coalition of Labor Union Women, the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and others to enact community control of the police where possible across the United States. So community control of the police is a little bit different from review boards and things like that. Community control of the police is actually the creation of a democratically elected body that has literal control over the budget, policies, and hiring and firing of the police, removing that power from the mayor and putting it into the hands of people who actually live in the neighborhoods where the police are working. So it gives the neighborhoods democratic control over their policing and flips the relationship, because today too often the police are occupying forces inside of our communities, and the community should be in control. They should not have an occupying force. The community should have people who are working for them to provide services that they need and to help them to be safe, and also to help them to deal with things like the mentally ill who need help and things like that. It should not be that if you have a mentally ill person and you need help with them and you call the police, that results in the person being killed. Tonight, the African American Equality Commission is hosting an event called Democracy Demands an End to Police Violence. This is a further discussion on the question of community control of the police with Frank Chapman, who's the executive director of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, who has led this fight nationally and has won significant significant advances towards that goal in the Chicago area. But I do want to address the two questions that have been put to people today. And I want to especially talk to those questions from the perspective of reaching out to the young people who are going to be leaders in the struggles of tomorrow. And in particular, leaders in the struggles against systemic racist police violence. The first question was, in light of the attacks on teaching Black history, why is teaching Black history important to you and your community? And I share all the comments that were made by by both the youth and by the panelists on the importance of Black history. But I also want to enlarge the discussion a little bit. The attack on teaching Black history is designed to disappear the experience of oppression and super exploitation that characterizes U.S. history, literally from the beginning of the colonial and chattel slave experiences until today. That is literally from 1619 or the mid-1600s until today. The oppression of Black people has been a characteristic of the U.S. experience. However, this erasure of the Black history continues other trends. So We also see an erasure of the history of U.S. indigenous peoples, which was reduced in U.S. education, films, and TV to a series of pleasant Thanksgiving fantasies and false cowboy narratives, attempting to erase the complex human lives of the millions of indigenous people killed in the United States genocide against them. The lives of migrant European workers arriving in the United States in the 1800s and early 1900s were similarly denuded of both their history and justice, such as when Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti were executed for a crime they did not commit in 1927, while Albert Einstein, John Dos Passos, Powers Hapgood, George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, and the American Federation of Labor were joined by large worldwide protests demanding clemency for their release. Sacco and Vanzetti were executed, and their struggle for justice was not taught beyond a passing mention at best in U.S. educational materials. Teaching Black history, championed today under the misnamed, I think, critical race theory, is attacked in a right-wing American Enterprise Institute op-ed by Max Eden, who quotes a African-American mother as saying, "Black kids are turning against white people of all ages, and white kids are hating their parents and their success and their heritage and calling them racist." Eden also points out that 17 states at the time of his writing have introduced and 7 have passed laws or regulations, colloquially termed CRT bans. This ugly distortion, making use of confused Black people and their concerns, distorts and attempts to undermine the just and healthy revulsion of Black and white youth against ongoing racist murders by the police, which erupted so forcefully and positively in protests in response to the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis in 2020. To claim that Black kids are turning against white people of all ages attempts to isolate the just actions of these youth from the cause, which is systemic racism and racist police violence. By separating individual action from mass united action, historical context, and from the systemic forces promoting racism and violence, Max Eden and others of his ilk are pretending that all of life is individual rather than social, and that knowledge of the historical genesis and current challenges of systemic racism are destructive to the harmony of life in our society rather than necessary if those issues are to be resolved. Eden's attack on white youth for hating their parents and their success and their heritage and calling them racist reverses the healthy criticism that youth of all backgrounds are leveling to the powers that be in our society, and also putting forth fake arguments, since white youth can both love their parents and be resolutely anti-racist simultaneously. There is a fundamental anti-democratic dimension to the attempted erasure of Black, Indigenous, migrant, and labor history in the United States. By distorting Black history, the well-funded right-wing forces represented by the American Enterprise Institute and others endeavor to make Black people illegitimate participants in U.S. democracy. Trump, in his claims of fake votes in the 2020 elections, focused his criticism on cities with majority or largely Black populations as the centers of fake voting, unjustly demonizing Black voters. The attack on Black participation in U.S. democracy is a response to the consistent commitment over literally centuries of Black voters to progressive movement forward in a society where systemic racism is a daily impediment to Black people living healthy, happy lives. And in fact, I would argue to white people living happy and healthy lives as well, because it is the oppression and the delegitimization of Black people who are the leading force for democracy in our society that at the same time undermines white initiatives, especially, for instance, union organizing campaigns, where unity is absolutely vital. Unity between Black and white, unity between Latinx and Black and white, Asian and Black and white. It's that unity that can fight for change, and that unity which is the challenge that the bosses are trying to undermine through the erasure of Black history and also labor history, and in fact, the distortion of white history as well. Youth and all people need to understand how our society arrived at the struggles we face together today if we were to develop meaningful struggles to fix the issues facing us all. I want to also talk to the other question, which is, what does making good trouble mean to you in terms of building a movement that can empower communities and win change? And here I might be speaking to some of the experiences that we have in the Midwest, which might or might not be true for Connecticut, because I suspect that Connecticut is more advanced in some ways than the Midwest. However, if there is good trouble, then there is also bad trouble. And I ask, what is the difference? Good trouble to me is collective, united, peaceful struggle of masses of people. In other words, individuals joining with others for a positive social change. The key here is collective, united, and peaceful. Bad trouble is individualistic and not building unity and not peaceful. It undermines the efforts by masses of people to unite and to win change. Capitalist culture always focuses on the individual, isolating people so they are more easily oppressed and exploited. However, the rich, the bosses, the capitalists are highly organized in their use of state power, like the police or National Guard, to achieve their goals. In response to the protests against the George Floyd murder, Minneapolis police came out in their battle gear to control the mostly peaceful protesters and to distort the images that were being shown on TV to make it look like these were scary people, when they were not. They were just people demanding justice. The protesters were doing good trouble, joining together to demand social change, to end racist police violence, and to win justice. There's nothing better than that. Problems of the scale facing youth today cannot be resolved by isolated individual action. It takes united, democratic, anti-racist good trouble that organize masses of people into coalitions with the leadership of workers and oppressed people and women that can shape real solutions and win the systemic changes demanded if the people of the United States are to make positive, lasting contributions to building a more just and equitable society. I want to personally, and this is from my personal experience, I want to personally encourage young people to learn history, anthropology, and languages. It is important to understand the variety of the human experience and to understand that our economy and our culture are social constructs that can be changed through mass action. It is important, as I see it, to understand the vast variety of human cultures as well as the underlying consistency that unites us as humans striving to have a safe home, food, education, and a social life. Studying Black labor and people's history is as important to working and young people interested in forging a new society as is the STEM curriculum for getting a job. They are vital to having an adequate context to build a united struggle, including all workers, locally and globally, all people seeking to end racism and for peace, justice, and economic equality into a united force for fundamental, revolutionary, and systemic social change in the United States, and to participate in the global movement for socialism. A great place to develop one's theoretical and historical understanding of the mechanisms of social change and the ways that we can all contribute is to engage in struggle, to come out and participate in the good trouble. You'll learn so much by doing that kind of work because the questions before you make you think about things like, why do we have to do this? Why am I having to address systemic racism over and over and over again over the years? But but I would also invite everybody to consider joining the Communist Party and the Young Communist League. The party has learned a lot over more than 100 years of struggle against systemic racism and for decent lives with dignity for all working people and all oppressed peoples, including and especially the Black community. I also want to recommend B. Lumpkin's February 23rd, 2022 article in People's World, The Power of Black History. Bea Lumpkin is more than 100 years old, and she has been a consistent fighter against racism and for socialism in the United States. She writes that Black history has the power to uncover the truth and expose the lies about the key contributions Black people have made to winning democratic rights for all. This is especially true of the Civil War and the Reconstruction. That was a crucial time in American history that has been falsified, as W.E.B. Du Bois said. But I would also say that it is true in every aspect of our lives today, that we cannot uncover the truth and expose the lies without also talking about the contributions of Black people, and in particularly in leading protests around systemic racism, but also for quality education for the Black and Latinx communities, for healthcare, and for so many other needed reforms in our country. In the end, the attempt to erase Black history is a struggle to undermine the democratic voice of Black people in the United States, to undermine the power of democratic action in the United States, and to advance the agenda of the ultra-right and those who see systemic change on behalf of building a society that meets the needs of the people as threatening. Let us all join in demanding that Black history be fully and realistically taught. Let us all make efforts to teach ourselves, and most of all, engage in collective struggle around the pressing issues facing us as humans, Black, white, Indigenous, migrant, Asian, and all other oppressed people. I think that the panelists' discussion, particularly around the treatment of youth and people who are in prison, we're raising extremely important issues that need to be fought for, not just in the New Haven context, but across the whole country. And the concept of how we treat prisoners as slaves must be rejected. Working people and youth and all people who stand for justice and progress are invited to join the Communist Party USA and to engage in the struggle for democracy and worker power and for socialism. I really am so happy to have been here today and to be able to participate, and I thank you all.
Eric Brooks, for your profound leadership in the freedom struggle. We really appreciate. Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause, please. Thank you. Now a call to the People's World financial situation. As you know, this is our 48th annual program, and it's hosted by Connecticut's People's World Committee. Right now, the People's World is experiencing a challenging financial situation due to the pandemic. This year, all the funds we raise will be in honor of Art Perlow, who has dedicated and writing for the paper, putting it in circulation and using it as an organizing tool. I know this very well and firsthand because I work alongside with Art in the Yale's Workers Club, which we have since changed the name to the Art Perlow Yale's Working Club. So beautiful. Every dollar of this contribution will be long allowing for the award-winning People's World to continue in order for it to thrive with our movement and make it stronger. You can contribute in the link posted in the chat for today's event, or you can go directly to thepeoplesworld.org. Donations for the People's World is in support of a publication that has been groundbreaking for equality, social justice, and peaceful, sustainable world since the founding day nearly 100 years ago. Woo! That's wonderful. Each and every contribution will be acknowledged and is greatly received and appreciated. And now we're coming to the end of our program. Okay. To close us out, we have a wonderful drumming rendition again from Brian Jawawa Gray. Thank you for coming. Thank you for our planning committee and all the participants that participated in this program. And we wish you well, be safe, and your lifelong journey and freedom struggle. Till next year, brothers and sisters, peace.